Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today, October 19th, where we're learning the stories of the ancient kings of Israel. It seems like Facebook and WhatsApp are not working today for some reason. The other websites are. So I'm not quite sure. What's going on here. No, hang on. Look, maybe Facebook is working now. Hold on. Because WhatsApp just went through. So just bear with me a second. I can't seem to log on to Facebook for the broadcast. It just doesn't load. All the other websites are working. Okay, I'm just gonna let people know that we're only on YouTube. Hopefully everybody will join us here. Yeah, Facebook's not working today, so whatever. I'm just gonna carry on YouTube here. Okay, let's do this. Today we learned last week, about the wicked queen Atalia, who wiped out her own family. Wicked, cruel queen. More than meets the eye, however, is what we spoke about last week. Don't judge a book by its cover. And we spoke about her grandson, Yehoash, who ruled after her, who started off as a very righteous king. This is the guy that, this was the king that was raised for the first 6 years of his life in the Holy of Holies, in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, a place where no one else is allowed to go. At the end of his life, tragically, they turned him into a deity, into an idol, and he believed that it got to his head that he was worthy of being worshipped, and that didn't end well. We continue now the stories of the ancient kings of Israel on our trajectory through Jewish history, with the next king who ruled after Yehoash, king of Yehuda, and that was his son Amazya. Now, I want to tell you guys that I've spoken about this before. It can get a little overwhelming to know who's who comes first and who comes later. And I just want you to know that we did create a family tree for you to be able to follow along with this, to be able to see who's who, to be able to follow and get the general background of all the kings of Israel. If you just go to jewishgardens.com/roots, that's jewishgardens.com/roots. We're holding right now in generation 40. We just finished generation 39 since Adam and Eve, and we're on to generation 40 right now, where we are meeting the son of King. No, sorry. We're moving from generation 41 to generation 42. My apologies. From King Yehoash to King Amazya. We're talking about the year 677 BCE when King Yehoash ruled. And it's a little bit after that Yehoash was killed by his own officers, and his son King Amazya took over after him at the age of 25. So this whole story happened about 2,600 years ago. We're talking about 2,600 years ago. And I hope that everybody's able to join us here on YouTube, because seems again like Facebook isn't working, but we're going to go straight into it. Oh, looks like Facebook is actually starting to work right now. So just bear with me a moment, friends. I'm just going to load the Facebook feed so that we can have both simultaneous and get into it. Apologies for the delays here. It's out of my control. I'm just going to load the Facebook here. Just really strange how how Facebook sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. It's just really odd. Okay, I think we're live on Facebook too. And to go. Okay, good. Once again, thank you for joining me here this morning on the Biblical History series. We're learning about the 41st generation, the end of the 41st generation from Adam and Eve. We read about Adam and Eve in the Torah this week. And now we're in the Biblical History series. We're learning after the 5 books of Moses. We're learning the books of the prophets. The 41st generation after Adam and Eve was King Yehoash, the leader of the 2 tribes of Yehuda and Benjamin. He was succeeded by his son Amazya after he was assassinated by his own servants. He ruled approximately 677 BCE. If you'd like to follow along the family tree since Adam and Eve, you can do so by looking at jewishgardens.com/roots. That's jewishgardens.com/roots. And today we're holding at the crossover from generation 41 through to generation 42. I'd like to welcome Elaine Collins and Rob Berger and Dean and Dan Dubansky. I see Corey's with us, despite the great the connection challenges. But here we are, and we are moving forward. After the death, the assassination of Yehoash, the king of Yehuda, his son Amazya rose to kingdom. Like his father, he was also a good king, and he was honest and straight in the beginning of his kingship, his kingdom. He was loyal to Hashem. He served only Hashem, the God of Israel, and he fulfilled all of his mitzvahs. And because of his good deeds, Hashem blessed him with success in all of his endeavors. He won over his enemies, and he ruled over his people with strength and with confidence. Amazya never forgot the evil that was done to his father by those who assassinated him on Yom Kippur, by the way. And he took revenge on the people that assassinated his father. He killed only the assassins themselves, but he did not take revenge on their children. As it says in the Torah, fathers shall not be punished on the sins of their sons, and sons shall not be punished for the sins of their fathers, because each man is responsible for his own sin. When the king returned from a successful battle against Edom, Edom would be Esav. So that would be like the Christian fathers of Christianity. Would that be maybe Italy? I'm not sure exactly what that would be in the Middle East, but he fought against Edom, maybe Saudi Arabia. I'm not sure exactly. But he won a war against Edom. And when he came back, he felt it got to his head. This was a test. Remember, success is always a test. The one thing we learn from history is that history always repeats itself. Hashem is constantly testing us. He gave him this extraordinary success to test him. And this time he couldn't handle the test because he won the battle against his nemesis, his arch enemy, Edom. And now he felt in his own heart that it was his own strength and his own might that won the battle. And therefore he began to worship the idols of Edom. His evil deeds made Hashem angry. And in order to punish him, Hashem injected even more arrogance into his heart and inspired him to want to wage battle against the other kingdom of the Jewish people, against the king of Israel, the king of the 10 tribes of Israel, whose name was Johash, same name as the father of Amazya. It's funny, oftentimes you find that the names of both kings were very similar. They were married into each other on many occasions, and they were cousins. So now King Amazya of the 2 tribes of Israel, of Judah, is now inspired to his own downfall by Hashem to wage battle against his counterpart and colleague, the king Yehoash, the king of the 10 tribes of Israel. In this battle, he will fall and he will die and he will be punished for having abandoned my Torah and going after idols. This is what Hashem says to himself. Didn't take much time, and Amazya, the king of Yehuda, sends messengers to Johash, the son of Yehoachaz, the son of Yehu, the king of Israel, king of the 10 tribes, and they give him the following message. You had better surrender to me and accept upon yourself my rule, because if you don't do so, I will go out to war against you, and we will see who will win. The king and the nation who will reign, or who will succeed, or who will win the war over the other, will rule over the entire land of Israel, the entire people of Israel. That's the message that the servants of Amazya sent to the 10 tribes of Israel. Now, the king of Israel was not shaken. He was not afraid by this incitement, and he sent a return message with confidence. He says, if you think that you're trying to scare me, you've not been successful. I'm not afraid of arrogant people like you. You are like a little weed. You're like a little thorn trying to scratch at the cedar. You're a miserable thorn that has sent a message to the cedar tree, as if to say, give me your daughter as a wife. Like you're threatening me that I am forced to give you my daughter as a wife. However, before the message even arrived from the thorn to the cedar tree, the animals have passed through the Lebanon and they've crushed the thorn even before you ever got started. You are that thorn, and I am the cedar of Lebanon. If you dare come out to battle against me, you will die even before you arrive. Just as it was in the times of Jacob, our forefather, when the thorn wanted to claim the cedar. The thorn was Shechem ben Hamor. Shechem was the one that raped the daughter of Jacob. We'll read about him in the Torah in a few weeks' time. He raped Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. Now, Jacob is compared to a cedar tree, and Shechem is compared to a thorn, and he figured that he will try to use his, to beat his chest to claim authority or any rights over the cedar tree. But the animals of the field, they were Shimon and Levi, the brothers of Dinah. They came and they killed him and all the residents of his city. Why do you want to come to battle against me? Do you really want to die? Do you want me to kill you and your people together? True, you've won the battle against Edom, and therefore your heart is filled with arrogance, but you will not prevail over me. This was the warning that the king of Israel sent to Amazya, the king of Yehuda, and he obviously failed in attempting to dominate over him through his incitement. With great many warriors, Amazya went out to battle. The king of Yehuda went out to battle against Johash, the king of Israel, and he failed miserably. Many of his soldiers were killed, and the rest scattered in every direction. Johash himself captured the king, Amazya, the arrogant Amazya. He brought him to Jerusalem, and he forced him to give him the golden vessels and the silver vessels which were found in the house of Hashem in the holy temple. And this wasn't even the end of the punishment of the arrogant and sinful king. He died a miserable death. His servants rebelled against him, just like the servants of his father rebelled against his father. He managed to run away from his palace. However, the assassins ran after him, they captured him, and they killed him. What is the geographical lines between the two kingdoms? Again, the kingdom of Judah ruled over Benjamin and Yehuda, so it was in the area of Jerusalem. And the king of Israel was in the Shomron, was there all the rest of the land of Israel. His headquarters, his capital was in the Shomron. Shomron is what they call today the West Bank, which is really called the biblical land of Samaria, Judah and Samaria. So you have Yehuda v'Shomron. The West Bank today is called Yehuda v'Shomron, Judea and Samaria. That's the real name of the West Bank. Judea would be the part of it which is under the 10 tribes of Judah. Samaria is the part that belongs to the 10 tribes of Israel. So exactly the geographical lines, I don't know, but but I can tell you that Judea and Samaria were evenly divided between the 2 tribes and the 10 tribes. And so it was the miserable death of Amazya, who again started off as a good king, but ended off, like his father, as a sinful idol worshiper, and that was his Achilles heel. Friends, we have to learn from history. Anytime we are successful, it's because we're serving Hashem. But the moment that success gets to our head, we become arrogant. And that's when we fail. You know, it's interesting when you look at the United States of America. I took my kids to Disney the other day, and there was this beautiful presentation at Epcot Center of the American Revolution. And, you know, Mark Twain is leading a whole speech about how we were succeeded in the Revolutionary War, and we succeeded in the Civil War, and women's suffrage and equality, and we've reached the greatest heights of success. But there is one thing that no nation in the history of the world has ever managed to overcome. This is Mark Twain speaking, or maybe it was Thomas Jefferson or someone else, I forget. And he said that there's one thing that no nation in the history of the world has ever been able to master, and that is prosperity, success. Whenever a nation has been given prosperity and success, that has always become their imploding downfall. And God forbid that should never happen here in the United States of America. Because what happens is that we tend to be filled up with avarice, with gluttony, with complacency, and that always becomes our downfall. We see it in the stories of our ancient leaders, the ancient kings of Israel. Each and every one of them, they are humble and worthy and serving God, and then tragically they fall into, and God gives them success, and then they fall into a state of implosion and avarice and sin and ego and arrogance, and they reject God. And it's this constant cycle through Jewish history of this wave. Let's not make the same mistake. Let's learn from the history, from our ancestors, that now we're successful. God has given us prosperity. We're living at the height of human prosperity. The Jewish people have never been as prosperous as we are today. Let us turn to Hashem with humility, instead of turning away from God and saying, oh, I have my bank account, and I have my IRA, and I have my investments, and I have my real estate, and I have my money, and I have my lawyer, and I have my business. No, let's not make the same mistake as the ancient kings of Israel. Let's turn to God with humility and say, thank you, Hashem. Without you, I am nothing. Let's lay tefillin more, not less. Let's daven more, not less. Let's be more scrupulous in the commandments, not less scrupulous, because that holds the key to our success, to our prosperity in every respect of our lives. We'd have to be insane and out of our minds to think anything else, because the definition of insanity is expecting different results from the same actions. Let's go just a little bit further. After the death of Yehoash, the king of Israel, we're switching now from the 2 tribes. The King Yehoash's assassination led to Amazya, who too was assassinated. But Amazya rebelled against King Yehoash, the king of the 10 tribes. He attacked him and he fell dismally against King Yehoash. Now, after King Yehoash died, the king of Israel, his son Yeravam ruled after him. Now, this king Yeravam was named after his great-grandfather many generations earlier. Yeravam was the one that was a great Torah scholar, you may remember. He rebelled against, he was the one that caused the schism between the 2 tribes and the 12 tribes and the 10 tribes. When the 12 tribes of Israel split into 2 kingdoms, the 2 tribes went to Rechavam, the son of Solomon, and the 10 tribes were led by Yeravam, who was the ancestor of this line of the kings of Israel. So Yeravam, the original Yeravam, was a prolific Torah scholar, but he was arrogant. And if you remember, Hashem offered him, let you and I and David, the king, walk together through the Garden of Eden. And Yeravam had the audacity to ask God who will walk in front. And when Hashem said King David will walk in front, he said, I'm out. Can you imagine the chutzpah? So here he is, his great-grandson now is Yeravam, also was as wicked as his ancestor, his namesake, who sinned and caused the people of Israel to sin. In his days, there was the prophet Amos. Amos, you may have heard of the prophet Amos. Amos, A-M-O-S. A-M-O-S, Amos was the prophet of Israel. According to my research, Amos was actually the brother of King Amazya, who we learned about just moments ago. So Amos would have been the brother of King Amazya. He was the crown prince, a descendant of King David. So Amos was a righteous prophet, unlike his brother. And even though he had a heavy stutter, Hashem sent great and important prophecies through him to the people of Israel. When the sins of Yeravam, the son of Yehoash, the leader, the king of Israel, became great, Hashem sent the prophet Amos to prophesy in Bethel, where they were offering offerings to idols of wood and stone. And he said to them, so has Hashem said, Hashem has sent me to you. Because of your great sins, your king Yeravam will die by the sword, and all of the people of Israel will be exiled from their land. These words of rebuke were not pleasant to the eyes of the sinners. One of them, who was a prophet to idolatry, the gods of Lebanon, of Sidon, of Phoenicia, hurried to the king, and he told the king emotionally, with excitement, about this prophecy of Amos. And he spun the report as Lashon Hara as follows. He said, "Know, my master the king, that Amos the prophet speaks in the name of God, and he is rebelling against you. He has said that you will die by the sword, and all of your people will be exiled." In other words, he made it sound as if you got to shoot the messenger, as if Amos is rebelling against you. And now, if it's good in your eyes, your king, our master the king, please give a command that he should be executed for his chutzpah. This is literally a case of shooting the messenger, taking no guilt, no responsibility yourself. The king heard the decree, the prophecy, and even though he wasn't happy to hear it, he did not want to harm the prophet. Amos himself is a righteous person, he said to the slanderer. And he said, I believe that he did not say anything that he did not hear. Hashem put these words in his mouth, this evil prophecy on myself and on the people, and I dare not harm him. Since Yeravam, who was an evil and wicked idolater, nevertheless believed the prophecy of Amos, and he chose not to hurt him, therefore Hashem battled on his behalf and gave him the ability to conquer the entire land of Israel from the nations that lived in it, until the entire land of Israel was more under Jewish control in his days than it was in the days of Yehoshua, Joshua, and in the days of King David. From the entrance of Hamat in the north until the river Nile in the south. Very, very interesting, right? So you got this guy Yeravam, who's clearly an idol worshiper. Yet, he's a sinful idol worshiper, but he accepts the word of Hashem. He refuses to believe that Amos, the prophet, is rebelling against him. He believes that Hashem has indeed placed the prophecy in his mouth, and he almost surrenders himself to his fate, that he will die by the sword and that his people will be exiled. So why does he not pledge allegiance to Hashem? What on earth is going on over here? It's easy for us to judge these people negatively, but let me give you a little bit of a different perspective. Soon we'll learn about a king called Manasseh. Manasseh was one of the most evil kings the people of Israel ever had. Abaye was once giving a lecture. Abaye was a Talmudic sage. He was once giving a lecture to his students, and he was talking to them about how evil and despotic this Manasseh was. That night he had a dream. Manasseh came to him in a dream, and he said to him, if you think that I'm so evil, then let me ask you a Torah question. And he asked him a question that Abaye, the Talmudic sage, was unable to answer. And in his dream, Manasseh mocks Abaye, and he says, you see, I know more Torah than you. So why then did I serve idols? And Manasseh tells Abaye something which is fascinating. He says, if you lived in our times, you would have been a worse idolater than all of us. Do you know that the desire to worship idols was so incredibly intense in our days? It was uncontrollable. We were unable to control the desire. We would wear tight skirts, so that when we would be overcome with the desire to worship idols, we would run and trip on the skirt so that we'd hurt our heads and maybe get a second chance to reconsider the desire, the temptation, the seduction. Friends, this is not something that you and I can possibly even understand. Why anybody would want to worship idols is like outlandish. It's like an alien behavior. It makes no sense. The only way I could explain it to you is that it's some sort of, think of it as an adulterous or a promiscuous desire. Think about how much desire you have for sexual sin. And when you think about it that way, you say, oh, okay, I can't relate to a desire for idolatry, but I can relate to a desire for adultery. I can relate to a desire for sexuality. And even our desire for sexuality is today extremely mitigated. I shared with you a story a few months ago about how the sages of the Sanhedrin, when they returned from the rebuilding, from the destruction of the temple and from the Persian and Babylonian exiles, when they came back, they actually destroyed the desire for idolatry, and they mitigated the desire for adultery. So our desire for adultery is today just a mere memory of what it used to be and what it will be when Mashiach will come. Our sexual appetite is highly, highly diminished today. It's not something that you and I can possibly fathom. So when we are speaking about these kings of Israel, you're looking at people that are highly, highly spiritually elevated. They were prolific Torah scholars. Yeravam ben Nevat, Achav. They were believers in Hashem, yet they could not control their desire for idolatry. Let us be kind to them as we judge them. Let us judge them favorably with the understanding that they're in a totally different league. These kings and queens were far elevated and far more higher than what we could ever reach spiritually. They were not what you think riffraff and just evil sinners. They were elevated spiritually. We cannot fathom the degree of their desire, but at least we can judge them favorably. With this, friends, I'm going to conclude our Torah study today. Next week, we'll continue with the prophet Hosea and his fascinating story of his own adulterous journey. We'll talk about that next week. But for right now, I'd like to say shalom to everybody. Don't forget that there's a Torah class with Rebbetzin Sarah today. I think it's at 1:30, if I'm not mistaken. I cannot remember right now. She gives a class to the ladies on Zoom. And that tomorrow morning is the Tanya class. We'll be learning chapter 39 of Tanya tomorrow morning at 8:30. Thank you very much for joining me here, my friends, this morning. Shalom, and have a wonderful day.